Welcome.
Hey.
So Chris, you following the numbers of what?
Get us started. And we are live.
Hey, good evening. I would like to call to order the September 14, 2020 Lake Washington School Board meeting. Let the record reflect that all board members are present and participating remotely. All meeting participants will also be joining the meeting remotely in alignment with the current proclamation issued by Governor Inslee. The board meeting will be live streamed and viewable on the district's website. If you are unable to live stream the meeting, viewers can call to listen at 425-936-2813. The conference ID is 37127. Regular board meetings will continue to be live streamed on the Lake Washington School District website and posted for viewing within 2 days. Okay, I will now entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this September 14th meeting.
Move approved.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Bleasner and seconded by Director Carlson that we approve the agenda. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The first item on our agenda this evening is an opening school report from Dr. Holman.
Thank you. As we have annually done for a number of years, we, at the first board meeting in September, come to you with a report of the opening of school. As you can imagine, this report is going to be unlike any report you've received before, given the conditions that we opened school this year. And so I'm pleased to introduce to you the team that directly supports our buildings and administrators in helping them in leading our 55 schools, 31,000 students in their learning. And so with that, I will welcome Assistant Superintendent Dale Cody to the microphone to provide you with this year's opening school report.
Great, thank you, John. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to take a moment and actually introduce the level directors briefly before we get into the presentation, because you'll be hearing their voices, many of whom you've met before. But if the level directors would not mind turning on their cameras, and when I introduce you, you may have to say hi, so the voice activation actually causes you to get on the screen. First, I'd like to start off by introducing Sue Ann Sullivan. She is the Director of Elementary Education for the east side of the school district.
Hi.
Next would be Rick Burden, Director of Elementary Education on the west side of the school district.
Good evening.
New to our team this year is Whitney Meisner. She is the Director of Secondary Education for the east side of the school district. Are you here with us, Whitney?
I am. I just forgot to turn off my microphone, even though I practiced that. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. And lastly, then Matt Livingston, the Director of Secondary Education for the west side of the school district.
Good evening, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you. And then I will get our presentation up and going here. Okay, great. We are excited for the opening of the 2021 school year. As you will see, teachers, classified staff, administrators, families have taken on a tremendous challenge to prepare for the opening of the school year. While I've introduced them, you can see the schools that they oversee. And I'd like to take a moment briefly just to say that their primary responsibility is to coach, support, supervise our building administrators, and to provide support to students and families. As we begin this opening of the 2021 school year, I'm happy to turn it over to Rick Burden.
Good evening again. Thanks for this opportunity. Wanted to bring some context, and this is not news to any of you, but wanted to actually speak to it directly. This is a very different start of school for this year. We have, Dale, can you hit the button for me, please? Thanks. Obviously, the coronavirus outbreak has had brought significant challenges to our world, to our nation, to our own community and our district, and as well as our schools. It's had an economic impact. It's being felt by our community, our students, their families, and even our staff and our own families. The pandemic has caused us to look very differently at how we serve our students and families and how we implement teaching and learning. Historical racism, racial injustice, and recent killings and acts of violence toward people of color has caused immense trauma and outrage in our society currently. There's a sense of uncertainty and unrest in the world, in our nation, and certainly in our own community. What's most important for us as children and students, and this has had an especially significant impact on our students as well as our schools and our staff. This really reminds us that what we talked about, that it really is of our incredible responsibility that we have to serve students and to raise the future generation that we're working with. It's a huge responsibility, it's a huge challenge, and it's really a great opportunity. We're doing things differently. We're reinventing the way we teach. You can see the picture on the slide that we're concerned about not the safety of students, the physical safety of students. Our in-person services look different. Our remote services obviously look different. we have to constantly be aware and work towards our cultural competency and humility. It really is a time for us to acknowledge the oppression that's existed, to increase our knowledge, increase our skills, and really be advocates for our students, particularly our students and families of color, but every student in the district. We're compelled to focus on the basic needs of students and families, really physiological safety needs. We're making sure that our families and students are being fed, that they have what they need the basic needs for an education. That includes, technology, that includes food, that includes clothing, that includes whatever needs that we can provide for them. The basic, we're also providing technological resources. This has been a tremendous challenge for us, but I think our district has done a wonderful job considering the challenge that we have. We got computers to every student. We had classified staff working to provide, get those computers ready. The technological needs are, we've done a lot of great work, and we've still got a lot of work to do and a lot of challenges ahead. Go ahead, Dale. You can hit the other. I think we have one more. What's really important, I think, and what we all really need to focus on is our children. And at this time, it's really important that we focus on the social and emotional needs of them and providing robust social emotional learning for our kids. They're at home. Some are at home, some are in school, very, very different environment. And it's incredibly important that we remember the whole child and the importance of taking care of their social and emotional needs, as well as the social and emotional needs of our staff.
One of the things that we definitely know is that this start of school has had a different impact on families, and that learning in the classroom looks differently. And so we just wanted to acknowledge that when you look at kids, they are ready for school. They are often learning in the same household with the same internet as their parents are working. And as Rick said, the well-being of the child and the adults, the staff and the families, are really on our minds as we're doing this work to start this year and keep the school year moving along in a positive direction.
We started planning for the 2021 school year last spring. We took a look at the remote learning program that we were able to create when our schools closed their doors in March, and we gathered input from students and families and school staff to inform us as we started planning for this fall and the start of this school year. We updated the community periodically on the progress of our work through the district website, as you see here, as well as through communications from the superintendent's office. Through the summer, we organized our planning work into return to school task force work groups focused on the principles you see here on the slide. In summary, they are about protecting the health and safety of everyone, our students, families, and staff, to make our plans while still being always thoughtful of addressing any possible inequities of access or program, to educate each student in a meaningful way, and to engage our families and community. On this slide on the right-hand side, you'll see a list of the many different work groups that consisted of central leadership, building leadership, teachers, and program department staff. We knew we needed to create plans that were flexible, knowing that they would likely need to be adjusted depending on the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic. So these work groups worked hard all through the summer. They worked independently, but also frequently got together and collaborated, sharing progress, information, and recommendations, because everything needed to work together. Okay, Dale. In the summer, many classified staff members worked to prepare our school buildings to be clean and safe to welcome students and staff, and to prepare materials for distribution for students and families. You can see some examples of them hard at work here.
And likewise, our teaching stations look a little bit different. You can see on the right there, we do have some limited in-person instruction happening for students whose IEPs determined that that was really important for them. But most of the teachers had all of their training virtually. As you can see, they're all masked up now. We've provided them with their personal protective equipment. And yet we're still finding a way to connect, to build relationships, and to be unified. And I just want to give a really big shout out to all of our staff everywhere in the district for doing amazing feats to get this school year started on a positive note. And here are some of our administrators, our principals. They've been working all summer long and continue to do so. I check in with them regularly, as do the other directors. And they're just so happy that we're able to continue with the students' education. And again, just want to really thank our principals for doing their work completely differently this year.
So in a typical school year, the students would be in their classrooms and the teachers would be passing out their laptops, any school supplies that they needed, curriculum, textbooks, and the like. But of course, things are different this year. And so we wanted to make sure that schools focused on keeping schools safe by following all of the recommended protocols. But we had a really strong commitment to making sure that every student had everything they needed for the start of school in their hands before the start of school. So you can see that took quite an effort. And the slide before this showed some of the staff members that came in to help make sure that all of the laptops were ready, to make sure that all of the school supplies were boxed up, bagged up, and ready to be distributed for families to come pick them up. And if we can go to the next slide now, here's a couple examples. On the left, this is Ella Baker Elementary, and in the middle, that's Alcott Elementary. And on the right, that's Meade Elementary. And this is an example that happened at every school where you had a line of cars that would pull up and they would say the name of their student and someone would go and get those materials for that student. And so then nobody had to get out of their car and they could just drive off and make sure that they had everything that they needed for their students. So this was a really big lift at each of our schools to have, 1,800 sets of materials ready down to our smaller schools. And we were really grateful for the leadership of the administrators and all of the staff that came in many cases, prior to their work calendar starting. So it was basically during their summertime coming in to help to make sure that the schools were in position to support the students to have all the materials that they needed.
So after much planning and preparation, we were happy to begin the 2021 school year with very excited students. You can see that although most of our students are learning remotely, they're happy to connect with each other, with classmates and teachers, and eager to begin their learning for this year. Lake Washington School District staff members were also very excited and happy to welcome students to learning, whether it is remote or in person. And these next two slides show administrators, teachers, and classified staff all working very hard to keep everyone safe and healthy. You'll see on the bottom left an attestation station, which is one of the ways that we check to make sure that if anyone is coming on campus, they're safe and it's okay for them to be there. And you'll see that students are safe and engaged and happy, and our goal is to make students and families feel welcome in their school communities to keep kids focused on learning. In the next slide, you can see in the center there, that's Alcott's mascot wearing a mask.
In the Lake Washington School District, we're so thankful to have such a supportive community with regards to our bond and levies. And so I wanted to highlight just a couple of those projects for you. As mentioned earlier, we do have some students in our buildings receiving special services, and Juanita High School in this picture is one of those buildings. And so we're so glad that the building is completely finished now, more or less, and has students in it. The Old Redmond Schoolhouse is the same. This was one of our remodel projects, so the same original outer part of the building, but the insides have all been remodeled. And so they're also getting ready for students who I believe are starting this week. And that's super exciting for those preschool students at the Old Redmond Schoolhouse. And the last one to highlight here is Lake Washington High School, which had an addition of a whole wing of 20 classrooms added. And so there are students who will be served in that wing, and the gymnasium and the commons are currently under construction as part of the expansion. And so I think with these schools and all the other schools that are in some level of construction or portables being added, that all of that is to support our growth and enrollment. And ultimately, we are just so excited when all of our students will be able to be back at school safely, hopefully at some point soon, to celebrate the opening of these new schools and remodels and additions with us.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody. We're really proud of our teachers, our staff, and administrators, given the incredible amount of preparation they've undergone to be ready to serve our students in a way that's never been done before. It's really quite inspiring, the amount of work that people have gone through this summer, leading up to the start of the school year, on behalf of students. To reinvent education in this way has been an incredible venture. We've all learned a great deal, and we'll continue to keep students at the center of our work as we go throughout the school year. So thank you.
I also want to just thank the tremendous amount of work that the entire organization has done to prepare for that first day of school. I know Dale and Sue Ann, Rick, Whitney, and Matt, working with their building principals then to articulate all of the guidance that we gave around reopening school, to be able to articulate that through their leadership lens to make that happen at the building level was a tremendous amount of work. So just want to thank them as well for everything that they have done and will continue to do as we continue our 2021 school year. So that's our opening school report.
Thank you all. Okay, the next item on the agenda for tonight is public comment, and due to the coronavirus, all board meetings are being held remotely. Please note that there is no in-person public comment to ensure social distancing. The board welcomes the public to the business meetings and encourages community engagement, and dedicates 30 minutes at our meetings to hear from the public at the public comment period. Currently, there are 3 options to submit public comment: written by submitting to Diane Jenkins at djenkins@lwsd.org. You can join us at the meeting by emailing Diane Jenkins as well and requesting to do so, and you can give oral through this Teams platform oral public comment. And then we also are accepting, I believe, by voicemail as well. There's a voicemail line that you can leave public comment. And more information for how to give public comment is on the district's website under the board tab. Tonight we have received 1 public comment from Joy Randall, who wrote to the board, and I will read that comment. And Ms. Randall wrote, "Hello, Superintendent Holman and school board members. With the start of the new school year, I wish to express appreciation for all your work in transitioning our district to online learning. With the immense need to change and adapt, it gives a great opportunity to take advantage of new ways of learning and teaching. The opportunity to enrich and reform the curriculum from a white-centered heteronormative lens is just one to take now. Have you considered this at all at all after many parents, especially families of color, have asked and inquired for months? Has there been consideration to adapt what Governor Inslee signed in May, Senate Bill 6066, that expands ethnic studies materials and resources for public school students in grades kindergarten through 6? If not, why isn't this being considered? Will you support and encourage teachers to do this? It is clear that we are misinforming our children by not teaching them the contributions that many Indigenous, Black, and other persons of color have provided in United States history. Not just Martin Luther King Jr. or Pocahontas, but so many more. We continue to mislead our children by not teaching the full narrative of U.S. history, of why there is and has been a deep racial divide in our country. Because of this, we cannot move forward to make true changes if we do not even learn or face them ourselves. It is clear we live in a time where Black and brown lives are deeply undervalued and violently treated. If we wish to truly change this, we must have anti-racist teaching and educators in our schools of predominantly white and Asian students to believe that this simply doesn't pertain to our community and more a Black or brown person's problem is short-sighted and ignorant, and we will continue perpetuating a system that does not value all people equally. I understand becoming an anti-racist educator doesn't happen overnight, but is a lifelong daily learning and unlearning of our own biases. Supporting the current teachers and staff to begin this journey, since they hold a tremendous impact on our children's lives, must be done. Here are 2 resources if you're not familiar with them yet. The Book of Unconscious Bias in Schools shares strategies for educators to counter their biases in schools and classrooms. And a link is provided to that. Also, Empowering Educators is a series of free resources designed to support educators in helping their students engage in effective, courageous conversations about race and social justice. This was created in response to educator needs. As leaders in our school district, I urge you to begin taking the steps to lead our teachers and staff to take this opportunity for change. And that was the public comment submitted by Joy Randall. Thank you, Ms. Randall, for writing to the board. And that is all the public comment we received for the meeting tonight. Director Carlson, I see you have your hand raised.
Sorry, I just wanted to, if it was signed by the governor, then Senate Bill 6066 is something where we don't have the choice to adopt it. But I was hoping that Dr. Holman could get back to Ms. Randall regarding her questions. So.
And Dr. Holman nodded for those listening.
Sorry, I'm turning both my mics on here. Yes, I'll work with Associate Superintendent Mike Van Orden and his team to make sure that we fully understand the question and provide a response to Ms. Randall. I believe she also included me in the email that she sent to Diane and the board.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda for tonight is approval of the September 14 consent agenda. I will now entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved by, was it Director Sage? Sorry, I looked down. And seconded by Director Carlson that we approve the consent agenda. Dr. Holman, will you please poll the board?
Director Bleasner?
Yes.
Director Carlson?
Yes.
Director Sage?
Yes.
Vice President Stewart?
Yes.
President LaLiberty?
Yes. Okay, the consent agenda passes unanimously. The first item on our non-consent agenda for tonight is the return to school. Well, it's the first and last item on our non-consent agenda tonight, and that is the return to school task force update. Dr. Holman, would you please provide the board that update?
Yes, absolutely. As we were thinking about, I think about the amount of information we've given to the board around planning and preparing for this school year, And now that the school year has started, we wanted to narrow our focus in on two very specific areas which are key to students being successful in their school year. One of those is our implementation of the technology footprint in homes and here within the district, and also teaching and learning, knowing that one is the vehicle and one is the content, and how those things are structured and whatnot. And so both Mike and Sally have prepared a presentation to really walk through a number of the different items that we've talked with the board about over the last 2 months, and now we're in implementation and continuing to learn from that implementation. And so I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent Sally Askman to provide her report regarding technology.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, John. Let me get my presentation up here. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay. We're spinning a little bit. Just one moment, please.
It's gratifying to know that a tech person actually has to wait for technology too.
Oh, I have my challenges. Can you see it?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, we are, I wanted to just summarize for you where we're at, what we did to get ready for remote. So this year we prepared 33,000 student laptops. Last year we prepared 23,000, and those 33,000 go to all of our students, our preschool classes, and also supply us with enough break fix inventory for when we have a problem that we can quickly exchange the device. We also have prepared and distributed 600 hotspots, and most of those are out with families. We're still waiting for some families to pick them up. Our classroom teams family guides are up on the website, and there have been 78,000 views of those guides so far. They're split into 4 chapters, and so across the 4 chapters there's been 7,800 views. I think I might have said 1,000, I meant 100. Community Teams live event that we had August 19th on technology has been viewed. There were 1,500 in attendance, and then another 1,000 who have viewed the recording of that event. We enhanced our family technology support to include 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. coverage 7 days a week. That's both phone answering and email service. We only had email before, and so that's helping us a lot. We're learning a lot from those calls. And then we had 282 million curricular and digital tools provisioned across all of our different offerings for all of our students and staff. And then the last item, probably most important, is the digital classrooms. We provisioned over 10,000 digital classrooms for our kids to engage with our teachers. And I just wanted to say there was an amazing effort by all. I can't echo loud enough what the level directors already shared about the work that was done by everyone in collaboration and coordination to make sure our families were served. In August alone, our teachers spent over 9,000 hours training on classroom teams and how to set them up and for their students. On day 1, we connected more than 25,000 students to teams. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about how we're analyzing where those students who tried to connect weren't able to in just a moment. Our school's family technology liaisons, which is what we refer to as the school help, they are all connected and working in collaboration with our technology operations team centrally. So, and then they also reach out to the families. So that's been a really good support. It's not new staff, it's a new focus in the remote learning era. And then all of our support desks are fully engaged, both parent, family access, and then our staff support desks. Our support requests and response. We've had about 6,000 requests. Our closure rate this year is lower than normal, only about 45% since the beginning of school as compared to 90% last year. We attribute this to the complexities of understanding and diagnosing in-home networks and connections, as well as just the increase in scope and volume. Our call lines, we're trying to improve the wait time. The average wait time right now is about 14 minutes for parents. And so we're looking at improving increasing the number of staff to answer the calls, as well as encouraging families and parents to use the callback option. I use that today in my doctor's office, where I didn't want to sit on the phone for 45 minutes. So we're working on that. We're looking at that. We're honing in on that and trying to improve our response rates for those parents who call in. We're also looking at language line options. We haven't had any reported challenges with ESL families, but there is a service that we can invoke that will help with non-English speaking families when they call for technology support. Some of our students reported struggling with connecting, especially during the first part of school. I think we've been in 8 days, maybe 9 days now. Some of our students, not all of them, reported problems with joining with audio and video in their classroom team meetings. And then our weekly Guardian Digest that Teams promises has been a little bit slow in getting it out. We're going to be getting it out to all families Sunday the 20th, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So what are we doing to improve and expand support? We are analyzing all of our help tickets. We're looking for themes where we might be able to hone in with better training. We're looking for themes around problematic technology or settings, and we're looking for themes around lack of communication. So all of those things together will help us improve our delivery over time. And we're working as fast as we can to do that. We have started daily engagement with Microsoft executives at the table with their respective product teams to help us optimize our environment for our families and for our learning. We recently, last week, when we heard about the join problems and the audio video problems, we pushed out the very latest Teams update. Now, some people would say, why didn't you do that in the first place? Well, we started provisioning equipment back in June. There have been version updates since then, so we had to do a mass update. So it takes a little while for the updates to reach all the households through our systems, but we think we've reached almost everyone we're able to monitor, and we see improvements already. From our 3% connection failures on day one, we're down to under 1%. That's still not good enough. So to help us understand why aren't we connecting that last 1%, we have a fine-grained administrative dashboard that Microsoft has helped us put up. We can literally find a failure of connection and go down to the individual device. In one case, we recently discovered that the device didn't connect. It wasn't one of ours. A family had chosen to use their own device, and it was an Android device, and it just didn't work in the same way that district issued devices work. So we were able to identify that and issue a device and suggest that as an alternative for the family to use. We are also we've just started working with Kirkland City Human Services. Joni Fu connected us with them, and they are also working with Redmond City, and the Kirkland City Council, of course, supports their work, and we're working to connect families. So what does that mean? To help with the costs for the hotspot connections, also to help us with some of the costs for specialized technology for some assistive tech needs that we're finding we have out in the field. And then lastly, Teams training in office hours for parents, and I'll end my presentation with that information. So what does our support look like right now? So for staff, ongoing support, of course, we have our internal help desk, both phone and emails, and I put in parentheses the family help desk. We put this in after a lot of feedback from our teachers that they were being taken off of precious instructional time by helping troubleshoot with individual technology issues or even questions from parents about the technology, just basic training. So I put that in there saying that we believe this is helping staff as well. We have our internal portal, and we have a self-help area we call Help Central. We have Classroom Team Support Site, which is a big team site for all teachers using Classroom Teams for instruction, and we post common issues or questions and remedies and how-tos in there for teachers. We have ongoing targeted professional learning based on what we're learning from the Classroom Team site and our help tickets. And we have our school-based technology integration facilitators. It's a program that Mindy Mallon runs where we give them advanced training on all of our technology, the new things that are coming in technology or maybe trouble spots, so they can then bring that help to the schools. And what does our family and student ongoing support look like? Family technology access, as I mentioned, 7 days a week, phone and email. We have our website where we posted our family guides, which I mentioned. Those are how to work through the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 and Teams products. And then our live events, which I'll talk about in just a minute, and office hours. And then our school technology liaisons who help us connect the technology needs from the families to the central support systems and back out through the liaisons at the schools, the neighborhood schools where the families exchange technology and other supplies and resources they need. So our Classroom Teams Basics live events and office hours for parents. We've partnered with the Microsoft Store. We wanted to wait for a week or so to get our feet under us for remote learning to figure out the appropriate delivery for parents for some supplemental basic training on Classroom Teams. So I'm happy to announce that starting this Wednesday for 4 weeks consecutively, we will have 2 one-hour live team events customized just for Lake Washington School District for parents on Classroom Teams Basics. And they'll have Q&As at the end. And then we'll also have a 6 p.m. office hours where parents can join a live event and ask questions, and we'll help the Microsoft Store staff moderate those so that we can make sure we get the right help and right questions answered for parents. As the weeks and days go on and we learn more from our help tickets from our parents, we will probably customize more targeted training in those live events or maybe even in office hours to respond to some of the most problematic or targeted needs that parents may have. And that is the end of my presentation. So I wanted to end the share screen in case you have any questions.
Director Sage?
Yes, thank you for that presentation. A lot goes into technology on a typical year, and this year, of course, was one of the focuses. I wanted to let you know I have heard directly from the Spanish-speaking community that it is difficult for them to call in and get tech help. It was described to me as, yes, the recording says, do you want to listen in Spanish? They press 2, and then the next prompt is in English again. So that's a little bit difficult, I guess. Well, I would imagine.
I'm sure.
But if there was any way to have a dedicated line in Spanish, that seems like it would be of direct assistance to a fairly large portion of our community.
Thank you. Yeah, we're working on that, and I'm working with Forrest Baker on that, and I will definitely test that line myself. I've been testing it, but I didn't catch that one.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Director Carlson?
Thanks for the update. I have actually 2 questions. The short and quick one is, as you can imagine, high school students, 7 to 7 is fabulous, but that may not be their peak usage hours. And so I was wondering, do we have any coverage for student support after hours on if a kid's notebook goes kerblooey or whatever. I mean, I guess it's the modern version of a dog ate my homework, but is there anything from 7 p.m. till midnight that could help our high schoolers?
The only thing that we have is email help. It's through the parent questions help. And sometimes we do, and parents do ask on behalf of their students come direct, and sometimes we are able to help them. We don't have staffing that late, but I make a note and see what we can do about it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be huge, but it's something that immediately jumped to mind. The one that is more a board question. You noted that on the first day, 5 out of 6 of the kids across the district showed up, which is fantastic, and is also a little concerning. And I'm interested in, on future updates, can we break out the connectivity issues by a couple of demographics? That is, I'm very interested in whether that was disproportionately our ELL students or our free and reduced lunch students. Those are two communities I'm particularly concerned about, and it would be good to know that we're reaching them, or if we're not reaching them, to know that we're not reaching them, and that would motivate us to start moving on that. So, thanks.
On that point, Chris,
Yep.
we will start providing regular updates to the board around our remote learning data. I'll get an update from Sally and Tim around where we think we are, as we're getting into the year, figuring out what the data looks like and how to manipulate that. But it should be within the next couple of weeks that we can start the remote learning updates with that disaggregated data that you're talking about.
Great, thanks.
Are there any students who have requested a hotspot that we have not been able to provide a hotspot to?
So far, no. In fact, we have about 200 that are in waiting at schools for, they've been prepped and ready based on requests that haven't been picked up yet. So far, we're in good shape.
Okay, good. Thank you. Director Bleasner?
Thank you. Well, first I'll thank for all your efforts and works. It has been quite the task in pulling that off. That is clear. Greatly appreciated hearing the extensive partnering with Microsoft to really be able to utilize that expertise and experience as well, and direct ability to make changes that are needed to be done and addressing from a big, broader environment purpose. The other question that comes up, we've talked about laptops, we've talked about hotspots and technology. The other piece that I keep thinking about is, and I hear about our monitors, routers, how do you work with those things? So as families come up against things that, that's a small little screen. You might need a bigger monitor in which to be able to do it. It might be cabling that a family might need or not have. It might be that they need better broadband in which to be able to access the video piece. How are we troubleshooting that and then providing potential support financially because those are costs all associated with it that come through as well?
So far, we've only gotten to the troubleshooting stage.
Okay.
We had to focus on, getting as much as we could out to the families without going in to be 31,000 households, service provider in addition. We realize there's going to be some challenges with cabling, and sometimes we can tell them, your wireless is saturated, or, we've helped some parents understand headphones that their kids might want to use. So we know what the devices are, and we've made headphones available at the school because that's been a high need. So there are supplies of headphones out there at the schools when families request it. Monitors, we don't have enough even for our staff yet. So, and so we haven't looked at the funding for that or the process for that. But if it becomes a big issue, I'm sure we'll have to put in some kind of a critical situation process. And cabling, we're able to tell parents what cable they might need if it's something that connects to our device, but what leaves our device to their walls and their routers and their provider is we have to rely on the providers that the households invoke to help them, and then we do the best we can. We still, in these help tickets, are looking for themes. So there are themes that we're going to find out where a Comcast might have a different situation than a Ziply, then might have a different situation than Frontier or CenturyLink. So we're watching all the time. So I don't have a good answer for you. I hear you, and I understand that's a big challenge for our families.
I appreciate the willingness to start analyzing and looking at those things and seeing how we start to address them. Recognize it's not the frontline issue, it's working the way up through it. So I appreciate that it's on the table.
Director Stewart.
Yes, Sally, I'd like to thank you and your staff for all what you have done, and appreciate also the ability to also take some of the comments that I've been receiving and that I've been funneling to you through John, and because I've got a funny feeling that they kind of represent others that don't have time to send in comments. A number of them that, be quite frank, they've realized you're overwhelmed, and so they've either given up or else they've decided to try another route. The issue of, could you give me a little more of an explanation of the Microsoft Store? I'm not sure I was clear, and I hope maybe I'm the only one, but I doubt it.
On the live webinars?
The Microsoft Store, whatever. Tell me a little more about that.
Yes, well, we're partnering with there's a team of education experts at the Microsoft stores who help the education K-12 customer base. So we've partnered with their experts through our connections with our executives at Microsoft, and they are helping us. They are doing the legwork and the hard work and the heavy lift, scheduling the live events for our parents on Wednesdays for the next 4 Wednesdays. So they'll help us deliver customized basic training on classroom teams and some of the Microsoft 365 tools that students use and parents use through these webinars. Then they also have Q&A at the end so that we can suss out what are we missing, what do parents need help with, or we might be able to help them on the fly. So it's really an extension of our support offering. And then at 6 o'clock on Wednesday nights for 1 hour, there's office hours. It's a live event where parents can log in if they want to, and they can ask any question they want. And behind the scenes about technology, behind the scenes are both the store team and Lake Washington School District teams who are helping to answer the questions. And then all that are on can benefit if it's a common question and answer. And if it's special and really needs attention and can't be answered in a live event, then we can get the contact information, of course, not on the screen, and follow up offline. So that's our plan. And then as we learn more about the help needs through our help tickets and our analyzing, we're going to fine tune those events that are scheduled in the out weeks in the next 3 weeks after this coming Wednesday, so that we have more targeted delivery of training around specific issues.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Wasn't quite clear.
Sorry, could not get off mute there. Any other questions? Director Bleasner?
Yes, so I'm off mute. Okay, so just a quick piece along the lines of, you had mentioned the 25,000 on day 1. Mm-hmm. Have you looked a week out where we were on week 2?
Yeah, so I don't have the math done, but we are under 1% of failed connections. So the first day, I had a different view from the Microsoft engineers at how many connections we had, because we did some telemetry tests to try to figure out if there was a geographic issue or what was going on. So that was 25 connections. Now we're under 1% failed connections, and it's going down. I haven't seen today's data. This was as of last Thursday night when I was starting to prepare my presentation.
So if I'm understanding, that means less than 1% of our students should have an issue in accessing the system as it's currently set up. Is that fair?
In connecting. So we know who all our students are that are set up. Now there's a variety of reasons why they didn't connect, but I'm looking at failed connections. So we know there was an attempt.
But if I don't even try, I won't show up.
Yeah, so don't take this as enrollment and attendance. This is
No, that's good.
technology connections and fails.
So I try and I can't get in. I show up in your data. I just don't want to engage at all. I'm nowhere to be found.
Yeah, you won't show up as an attempted connection.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there's
I
a lot
of that's being tracked elsewhere, correct, John?
Yeah, there's a lot of, well, it happens to be kind of all in my division right now. So Tim Krieger, who heads up data services and accountability and research, and Mindy Mallon in technology integration, and then Forrest Baker in tech ops. So Forrest is running that administrative console for the connections, and then Tim is helping us with our attendance and enrollment information, and a whole bunch of other people. So at the point that it makes sense, because the data is really moving right now, we'll do some correlations, but it's a lot of work right now to do the correlations till we settle out a little bit.
So the attendance and enrollment information will be coming in the near future, I would hope.
Yeah, that would be John's
okay
call on the date, but yes.
Yes, because we are required to take attendance as if we were in session in person. And so there's some updated rules around what that means to be attending. And so we are applying those as well as students just participating in a live session.
And so are we documenting that every day?
And so if Matt Gillingham could jump on and talk about the rules, essentially yes, but there's some procedural things behind the scenes that have to happen.
Yes, so we are required and expect to take attendance on a daily basis. However, what makes this different in a remote setting is that we have, unlike a class that might be scheduled to occur at 8 in the morning and is from 8 to 9, and students are either present or absent during that time, because we have a combination of synchronous and asynchronous learning, students might engage in their learning, particularly some of our older students might engage in their learning at 10 o'clock at night, and so there's a lag in our attendance because we have allowed teachers to go back and retroactively indicate that a student participated for a day. And so we're still we've provided initial guidance to all of our schools and teachers, and we're actually going to be revisiting that guidance in the light of a couple weeks of experience to just check the practicality of that guidance. So that's one of the reasons why, where normally at the end of the day, we'd be able to look to say, who were the students that were here today, because the day is done. The reality is that our day isn't done the same way as it was before. So, and so that's we kind of have a little bit of a lag time that we didn't have before, and being able to check attendance, because teachers now have more latitude to go back and enter attendance for a given day, following evidence that students participated in that learning.
Okay, thanks. It's all new to us.
Director Stewart, your hand is raised, and then Director Carlson.
Thank you. A couple of questions, and I'm assuming that there's some reasoning behind. Some teachers have been very insisted upon the students being visual. In other words, having their camera on from the start to finish on lessons. I understand that's probably playing the devil with a lot of people's connections. And I understand there's also some kids that are just uncomfortable with it. Are some of the teachers insisting on this because they want to be able to keep attendance correctly, or they're wanting to make sure that everyone's engaged? I'm just not clear if there has been a hard and fast rule, or if it's teacher by teacher.
So I don't have an answer for you right now, Mark. Sally, I don't know if you have an answer, or Mike, if you know an answer to, because it's really a pedagogical question of, are we asking our teachers to ask students to turn their camera on live? So Mike, I don't know if that's something that you're working with.
I can say that for teachers, when they're reporting connections challenges with students, the first step or remedy is have them turn their video off. So that's all I know about that topic.
I would say there hasn't been a edict, all kids put your cameras on. I think, any good teacher is going to say, I want to see kids, but if there's some discomfort, if there's some challenges, obviously they're going to say, don't worry, just go ahead and turn your camera off. It hasn't been, I don't think it's a requirement for attendance. As Matt was saying, students completing a task, maybe for example on a Wednesday where you're not even online with a teacher, counts as attendance as well. So I'm not aware of anybody saying, if I don't see your face, it doesn't count. That's not something I've heard about. That's not to say there isn't somebody out there doing it, but as far as I know, that's not the case, and that definitely has not been the instruction we've provided.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that some parents have been reporting that, and also I'm curious. There's an end of the day check-in apparently that a lot of teachers have been asking for. Is that also then to make sure that everyone's kind of attended at the end of the day by that point, or?
Yeah, and I can talk.
Seems like there's sometimes an hour, 2 hour gap in between sessions, and all of a sudden they have to log back on just to check in.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about that too in my presentation, but I think we can. That's one of the areas we're looking at evaluating, Mark, because I think as you're pointing to, it's some folks are saying, that's a good idea, but it's not really working as well as we'd hoped. So I'll talk more about that during my presentation.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Director Carlson.
Thanks. So this is following up on the attendance questions. And it seems to me that there's sort of multiple dimensions to this. We've got the technical fraction of kids who try to log in, who successfully log in. That's a good number. We've got a planned sort of attendance, which is something where we're working out the details of it is more challenging. The one that I'm more worried about in the sense of I don't want to wait 2 weeks to get the answer to this is what fraction of our students have we not seen yet at all? And that's something that ought to be a number that would not be too difficult to get. So I would love to be able to say we've got 98% of our kids, we've got evidence that they're trying to attend school. But I don't have that number.
Yeah, we can provide that to you this week.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board on this presentation? Okay, Dr. Holm, it sounds like we have at least one more.
We do, and Mike was just referencing that, and so I'll invite him to the screen, and this really is an overview of the teaching and learning side of our remote learning implementation. So the floor is yours, Mike.
Thanks, so I'll get my item pulled up here for you. Everybody see that okay? Okay, I see a nod. So I'm gonna just share a high-level overview of how we're delivering instruction. And while many of our instructional approaches are very much the same as they've always been, if you think about how they're applied in a remote setting, as Dale was mentioning earlier, the delivery changes pretty substantially in some cases. And so I'll talk through some of that tonight. Before I go into the actual instructional changes, though, I did want to talk briefly about how we've been preparing our teachers and also the just tremendous amount of work that our teachers are doing to be ready for instruction each day. So I think we shared briefly in one of our back to school updates, we shifted a large amount of time from our LEAP time to August, and we provided a large amount of asynchronous learning for our teachers around things like Teams and some of our mandatory training. And then in August, we have typically a week with our teachers and building administrators where we do professional learning. And oftentimes that includes things like our mandatory training, safety training. Because we were able to move much of that asynchronously, we were able to take advantage of the time in August to have live Teams events with our teachers. And those events ranged from everything from core instruction, assessment, equity, our social and emotional learning. So those were opportunities for us to work with teachers. And then we even had rooms where folks broke out into subject area groups with our instructional specialists. So we were really able to provide concentrated learning for that whole week. And there was just a tremendous amount of effort to make that happen on the part of our directors and teachers and instructional specialists. So those were providing examples of how to teach in a remote setting. We also, as I mentioned briefly just a moment ago, we're able to draw on our professional learning management system where we can load professional learning for our folks so that they can go and access it anytime. And so we saw a significant growth in our professional learning management system, over 100,000 independent sessions that people attended between July and September when we opened. And so again, having these systems, as Sally was describing, and our professional learning management system in place really have saved us and allowed us to prepare our folks to be well prepared for those first days of school. In addition, we provided a significant amount of resources to our teachers that they can access at any time as they're thinking about how to deliver remote instruction. And as you can imagine, it's really a fire hose of information right now. So the value of having resources like this is, as teachers have capacity and have time, they can take advantage of these resources and continue to improve their craft. And I have to say, our teachers are working probably harder than they've ever worked. And if you've ever heard about our new teacher program, you know that when new teachers come in, there's just so much to learn. You're taught about how to deliver effective practices, but when you're faced with instruction day to day, the workload is substantial as a new teacher because you don't have a toolbox to draw on. Well, all of our teachers are in that boat right now. They're all having to figure out how to deliver instruction. They're spending significant amounts of time on the weekends and on weeknights and throughout the whole day. So as an example, think about if they want to create a video to do a demonstration. So for example, I was a science teacher, and so I don't have my kids in class anymore. Well, it used to be I'd pull out my science materials and I'd put them on the counter and I'd get set up that way, and that might take me an hour or so. But now I'm having to set up a video camera and make sure that the angles are good and make sure it saves appropriately and do multiple takes. And so that's taking a substantial amount of time. So even with all of these resources we're giving our teachers and with all of the ways that we provided support for them, they are really thinking so differently about how to deliver instruction. And that's just a tremendous amount of work and effort on their part. And so I want to acknowledge all of that effort that they're going through to get us ready to deliver instruction day in and day out. So what I'd like to do now is give you an overview of elementary and secondary, and again, very high level of how we're delivering instruction. As we were preparing for instruction over the summer, as Sue Ann Sullivan was mentioning, our teams were working with some common elements and thinking about some common approaches. So for example, we started to have conversations about the need to make sure that there was social emotional learning each day. And so I'll talk more in a few minutes. That's where that beginning and end of the day checkout came. And again, some of these things, we're making some assumptions about how school should work. And then as we try these things out and we learn from them, we'll need to make adjustments. So again, remember, we're a couple weeks in. We're going to learn a lot over the course of the year and make adjustments and improvements as we go. In addition, we were thinking about things like our synchronous and asynchronous time and having blocks of time so that we can be really focused and intentional about what we do. We were thinking about our K-2 students and the need for them to have much more support, and we're still working through that. I'm thinking about the different support programs that we have in place, like special education, safety net, and coordinating teachers, so that not only do you have a general education teacher, but you have these specialist teachers that need to fit into the puzzle and make that all work. We were thinking about the importance of literacy and math, particularly as foundational content for all of our subject areas. And so how do we make sure that we really do a great job there so that kids can be successful in areas like science, where math is so important, and social studies, where literacy is so important. And finally, we were thinking about how do we build in family connections each week and time to have teachers relating to their students, because now more than ever, our families are partners with us. And in fact, we're delivering instruction in the homes of our families. So as we thought about how do we deliver instruction in a remote setting, we still have the same ways that we think about instruction in classrooms. We have direct instruction and small group learning. We have tasks that students need to complete. We have digital tools that they use, but we're having to think different ways about how to deliver direct instruction when your kids aren't sitting right in front of you. For example, during a literacy lesson, if you've ever been in an elementary classroom, you might have seen these kidney tables where the teacher sits in a little corner of the table and then the students are spread out in front of him or her, and they're doing lessons where kids are touching books and the teacher's giving them feedback. Well, what does that look like on a Teams call? Very different. So we have to think about that. We also have to think about what are we doing when we're live and what are we doing when we're not live with students. And so, for example, as I was mentioning, a live literacy lesson, I'm having to think about different ways that I can see students on a screen demonstrating the skills that I want them to demonstrate. So I mentioned the literacy lesson. I'll give you another example of an evidence-based instructional practice. Compare and contrast. It's just the bread and butter of good instruction, having kids look at similarities and differences between different concepts. Well, in a classroom, you might draw a Venn diagram on a piece of paper, and a teacher might walk over and look at it, and it's pretty straightforward. A teacher now has to think about, well, how do I do that on a screen? Can I have kids hold up their papers? Are they going to submit them electronically? So I'm really having to think about, how do I make the best use of that synchronous time, that live instructional time? And then I'm going to have to think about, okay, when students aren't working directly with me, how can I make sure that those independent tasks, that independent learning, those times where they're really thinking through things and doing work, it's probably not the best use of time to be on a screen when kids are solving some problems. And so that will be an opportunity to set something aside as more synchronous or asynchronous. So I'm planning through, what am I going to do live? What am I going to do when kids, what kind of instruction am I going to give kids so that they can do some work independently? How am I going to give them feedback? What am I going to assign? How am I going to grade it? And all of those things have to be woven and connected together. And then in addition, as we were thinking about the essential content, the amount of times kids spend on screens, the need to coordinate people in our system, we did make an intentional decision to have PE and music and library science and social studies more asynchronous so that we can better coordinate all of the different elements of instruction and curriculum and really focus on that synchronous time so that teachers really are taking advantage of the time that they have with kids. We just know that if you ask a kid to sit on a device for 6 hours and listen to a teacher, we know particularly in the younger grades, that just is not as effective. And so how do we really take advantage of the time when we're live? In addition, as I mentioned, we have to think about the delivery systems. And so there are different ways of delivering synchronous and asynchronous. And so you may have heard about some of these before. You might start a lesson where we're live and then say to kids, okay, that was the concept. Now go and work on some problems around that and then come back. So that's one approach. Another way is to flip that and to say to students, I want you to read this in advance on your own independently, and then come on in and then we're going to go over it together in person. And so you can flip the live and asynchronous time and get similar outcomes, sometimes depending on the content. Sometimes you want to focus on something different. And so the instructional approach will be dependent on the type of things you're teaching. In addition, we don't want everything to be whole class. And so we have to think about, how do we do small group instruction? And so again, there, we might have students watching a video and then working with smaller groups of students so that we can divvy up classes. And again, when we're in person, we have all sorts of methods to do that. We have independent tasks that large groups of kids in the class can be working on. And then as a teacher, I can pull 5 or 6 students to work independently with me. And then I can keep an eye on what the rest of the kids are doing when they're in a classroom. Well, when it's remote, there's all sorts of different logistics that I have to think through. So again, our teachers are working through some of those strategies, some of them very similar to the ways we do instruction when we're in person, but having to think about the different media that we're using to deliver it. In addition, we provided teachers with some sample schedules. And so this is something we've been getting some feedback on. So we provided teachers with a schedule that, for example, across all 6 grade levels at elementary said, here's where we would recommend, how you would recommend delivering your literacy instruction, your math instruction. And we developed this so that we could do a number of things. One is we have specialists that work with our students. So English language learner specialists, safety net teachers, special education teachers. And so if we want to support kids in literacy and that teacher has to work with kids at multiple grade levels, it makes sense to divide the literacy time up so that I can work with primary kids in the morning more in literacy, and then I can shift my attention to students in the intermediate grades a little bit later in the day. And so building a schedule like this allows you to put those folks in so that they can really take advantage of the schedule. Now, this is a sample schedule, and we shared this with schools, and you've probably been hearing that each school is doing slight variations on this that are having pretty substantial differences when you look from school to school. And so, for example, that time in the morning where we say, you should have a check-in time in the morning. Well, some schools are saying, we're going to make that live every day. Some schools are saying, we're going to do an asynchronous task first. And so what we're going to do is we'll be working with our principals to say, where can we find some places where we can create some more commonality in the schedules? Because we are hearing from our community, whether it's a family with kids who are all in the same house or some families that are sharing resources and creating pods, it's becoming really challenging to figure out how do we support all of our kids when schools are on different schedules or even teachers are on different schedules. So know that that's something we're looking at. In addition, as Mark was mentioning earlier, we did say initially, we think, it's really important to have a check-in time in the morning and then a check-in time at the end of the day, because there's lots of asynchronous time. And so that connection is a way at the end of the day to see how things are going. Well, again, sounds great on paper, sounds great when you're planning, but we're hearing from a lot of families, hey, by noon, my kid's rolling along. They've got it. They don't need another check-in. They're totally fine. And so we'll be gathering some data about that and working with our families to say, maybe it makes more sense to have in the morning to say, by the end of the day, we want you to fill out a form that says, how did the day go? Or what was a challenge that you want us to think about? And you can complete that at 10 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon or even 5 o'clock at night. And so we're evaluating that right now. That was one of the things we're hearing from our community is, that checkout it's not working the way you'd hoped. In addition, the times where there's live instruction, there's pretty significant differences from school to school, and we're seeing if we can make any adjustments to that. But again, know that things like start time and that differs from school to school, specialists who come into the schedule, all have an impact on when we can offer live and synchronous instruction. And we have, for example, itinerant teachers who have different schedules at different schools. And so those are all making those kind of fine adjustments that we're seeing in some of our schools. In addition, I just wanted to share briefly what a day might look like. So this is a second grade example. So now if you take across, I just shared with you, 6th grade levels. Well, now we're just focusing on 2nd grade. So for example, in the morning, again, you might see that beginning of the day check-in. There might be a social and emotional learning task, how are things going, and then jumping into some live instruction in reading, writing, or math, and then some small group support where we might have a safety net teacher or English learner teacher or special education teacher come in. We built in some time for lunch and movement. And then in the afternoon, there might be more flexibility. So you might be working on Lexi or Dreambox. And then that might flip if you're in the primary or intermediate grades, just depending on the school schedule. Again, we also had that end of the day task, and so we're evaluating that. Then remember, on Wednesdays, that's a day where we're completely asynchronous. And so again, there we built in things like small group support and time for students to work on tasks and assignments and some of those digital tools that we have where they can work on practicing and reinforcing skills. In addition, we built in our PE, music, and library time on those days, really to take advantage of, again, that Wednesday that's more asynchronous. And then finally, just really now getting down into a particular subject area. This is an example of a literacy schedule for an individual student. And so a teacher would create a week-long schedule with links to things that students would need to do for the week, what the teacher will be doing, what small groups will be doing, and what independent practice would look like. And again, just look at this. This is, as a teacher, I'm having to put this weekly schedule together, which I would do anyway, but now I'm embedding links. I'm thinking about how I'm engaging with my students. I'm thinking about how much time it's going to take. I'm monitoring the data from the how well students are participating. I'm calling students who aren't participating. So there's just a significant amount of work just to get down to a single subject area. And then remember, at the elementary level, our teachers are teaching literacy, math, social studies, science. They're thinking about what's synchronous, what's asynchronous. So pretty significant amount of planning and effort. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on, as Rick Burden mentioned, we also have built in social emotional learning to our instructional approach. And so there's weekly social emotional skill building activities, curriculum, welcome and inclusive activities that are built into the day. And so Johnny Fu and his team have put together a tremendous amount of resources and supports for teachers that they can take advantage of and build those into their day. In addition, they built in examples of how do you teach things like routines and procedures. And you may have heard, as you read the newspaper, kids are doing things online that they probably shouldn't be doing, and they're getting into trouble for posting inappropriate things or doing things in different ways. We have to reteach how you work and behave online. And so there's time and effort that our teachers are putting into that. So for example, what's appropriate to do online? What's inappropriate? As Mark was mentioning, when might be a good time to have your camera on and when might be a time to have your camera off? What do you do if you're uncomfortable with that? How do you raise that as a concern? How do you put a closure to the end of the day that's meaningful for kids? So lots of work, and again, resources that are available for teachers. And then our teachers are doing a tremendous amount of work to create some of these as well. So that was our elementary program, and as you can see, lots of work and planning and effort on the part of our principals and our teachers and our central office folks. At the secondary level, a similar approach. We're thinking about what's synchronous, what's small group, what's asynchronous. We're also being very intentional at both levels, and particularly at the secondary level, with teachers providing additional supports who may for students who may need some extra time or have a question about a concept. And so there's time built into the day for teachers to be available to answer questions, to talk to students, to reach out to them if they're having problems. There's also technology tools built into many of our curriculum resources, and so those are available to students as well. So similar to the way we create this flow in the elementary level, we think about what's important to deliver synchronously, what should be asynchronous. And again, there's some things that really you don't need to be on a screen with a teacher to do as a student. And if you think about a school day, even when kids are in person, there's lots of time where they're working independently. It might be in class, it might even be outside of class when they're sitting at lunch or on a break and doing some homework. We're also thinking about how teachers are supporting the work through, as I mentioned, the connection hours and providing additional supports to kids. And then really, again, what are teachers assigning and how are students completing it and how are they turning it in? And for the most part, that's going well. There's been some glitches where things have been lost or not submitted. We're working with teachers, and this is the perennial challenge of a student who spends a lot of time, submits it, and it gets lost, and then sometimes is asked to do it over. And that is just spinning wheels, and it's not fair to students. And so we're trying to work through how do you help a student to recover it or acknowledge that the work has been done and give them another way to demonstrate proficiency. And so as you can imagine, that's an interesting dynamic with teachers and students that we're working through. So we're learning about all these things as we go. Much like at elementary, we have a schedule. At secondary, it's really built around kind of our, I think we've shared this before, our period schedule where we divided the periods roughly in half. We do have probably at the secondary level more consistency just in terms of the time blocks than we do at elementary, partly because while we're remote, we created a common start time for our secondary schools. And so again, most of those schools are on similar schedules. There's some slight variation between them. And then again, as you drill down to an individual class, teachers are creating menus and agendas and things for students. And so this is an example of a chemistry class where a teacher has created tasks where kids can find it, how they turn it in, and due dates. And so again, there's some consistency in this, and there's some variation as well for individual teachers as they think about how to manage that. And so one of the things that we are seeing more than ever is there's a necessity for teachers to really work together just because there's so much work to do. And so ideally, all the chemistry teachers, even chemistry teachers in different schools, are coming together and saying, you know, how are you collecting your assignments? Can we have a common approach? We'll acknowledge that there is still variation. And so that was one of the things we saw in the spring. Parents are going, gosh, one teacher collects things this way and another teacher collects things this way. And so that's part of the learning I was sharing is how do we continue to create some consistency so one student doesn't have 7 different ways of submitting and collecting assignments. To wrap it up tonight, I just wanted to give a high-level overview of some of our programs and the way we're thinking about instruction and remote learning in these. So for example, in our English Learner program, and I think we've shared some of these things before, we began our instruction, or we're beginning instruction today. We began instruction today. That's happening primarily at the elementary level in small groups with an EL teacher. Those groups are about 20 to 30 minutes in length. Delivered 4 days a week for emerging students. And then for our students who are more proficient, it's typically 1 day a week with lots of monitoring. And so our EL teachers are working very closely with general education teachers to make sure that kids are making progress. And if a student is struggling more, they might get more time. And if they're doing really well, they'll be in their gen ed setting more frequently. There's also regular family connection meetings that are part of our EL program. And then at the secondary level, we began instruction on the first day of school, and students are served, particularly students in our who are less proficient in our classes, our standalone classes for EL. In special education, Dr. Hitch shared much of this in a presentation a few weeks ago with you, but at the elementary level, again, we're looking at one-on-one or small group instruction, co-taught classes, intervention blocks, and then as we shared in a recent board brief, in-person instruction. If we bring in preschool through our Transition Academy, I believe it's over 400 students that are receiving some form of in-person instruction each day. And then at the secondary level, again, one-on-one and small group support. We're continuing to support our co-taught classes. As you know, there are also content classes for special education, intervention support, and then again, we started some in-person learning for our students. And I have to say, I think I shared in the board brief, we're unique in that of having the degree of in-person learning that we are having for many of our students with disabilities. It's not something that we're aware of happening in any of the districts in our region, though some are looking at us as a model for them. And then finally, for our highly capable programs, this is an area I think really proud of, our highly capable teachers and our highly capable program support folks. So we're providing math and reading weekly. We continue to have our pull-out quest full-day remote sessions, and one of the benefits of remote is it's easier to get kids together and easier to have teachers with kids as opposed to when we have to transport them to a completely different setting. And so full-time quest, we can have daily remote sessions in line with general education, both synchronous and asynchronous, and some really wonderful supplemental curriculum resources that our team has pulled in to allow our students to really extend their learning. At the secondary level, we have our full-time middle school quest and daily sessions. High school and AP classes are being taught in line with general education. And we also have been able to take advantage, I think we shared this in a recent board meeting, of a lot of the College Board and AP Central resources that are now available and really supporting our remote instruction. And again, there we also have some supplemental curriculum resources. And I think one of the benefits of the work that we're doing here is we really are thinking about how do we push some of these great things we're doing in our highly capable program out for all of our students. And so as we work through implementing many of these resources, we're also thinking about how do we extend those. So lots of people working really hard to make remote learning work. I think as I mentioned at the beginning, it's important to know that we are learning as we go. This is not perfect. It's a completely different way of teaching, and there will be some bumps along the way. But I think the goal for us is to continue to make improvements, continue to make refinements. And as you saw, even compared to the spring, it's pretty much a night and day difference in the way we're delivering instruction. So with that, I think that's going to be it for our presentation tonight. I did want to leave you with some administrator comments that we heard as we were meeting with our secondary administrators last week. What we really are hearing is that people are working together more than they probably have ever worked together before to support our students. Teachers are banding together to problem solve, to collaboratively lesson plan, and as I mentioned, we know there have been some bumps and some challenges along the way, and at the same time, people are doing some truly amazing work. And I want to wrap up tonight by acknowledging and thanking our teachers and our classified staff. They're just doing more work than we ever could have imagined, and they're doing it in better ways than we ever could have imagined. And we really are in their debt. So with that, I'll wrap up and see if there are any questions I can answer.
Director Carlson and then Director Sage.
Mike, I wanted to say thank you. This is extraordinary to finally, I mean, over the summer, I've been watching the preparation and all this, but rubber's hitting the road. And I just want to say to you and your team and all the teachers who are doing this is nothing short of heroic. So thank you. Just a comment, not a question.
Director Sage, then Director Stewart.
Again, you can tell all of the work that you and your team and staff and teachers have all put into this. And it does show the creativity that I've seen on many of my own students' lessons, the way they are able to, the connections that they are trying to make, and in our case, successfully make, is pretty amazing. I also wanted to say that I love the collaboration with the teachers. There's not a lot of time during the school day when you're in person. So that collaboration time and that sharing of, you know, tips and ideas and how-tos is pretty amazing. And parents too. Parents have been sharing ideas with each other and helping out other families to try and navigate some issues, even some of the tech issues. But as far as other things that parents maybe are coming up against, parents are really pitching in and helping each other as well. So appreciate the fact that you are all working on how to make this easier, more seamless, and, you know, make the schedules make sense.
Oops, Director Stewart.
Thank you, Mike. Just FYI, I sent John, and perhaps John's already forwarded it to you, a long conversation on Facebook today about scheduling and a lot of problems that they're having, especially the families who have 2 or 3 kids in elementary, even in the same elementary school for that matter, and their schedules aren't meshing. So it's something that, you know, it's not only from school to school, but sometimes within the same building, if you will. But you'll see those comments, and it's some of them are rather lengthy, put it mildly. I think it took 4 hours to transcribe. Anyway, that said, when we look at the chart that was in the board briefs on the kids in the special needs group in the let's see, what is it? In the learning center, it said we had 146 enrolled in, and I don't know if you have this in front of you, but I'm just going to read it off here. It's 146 total enrollment in the learning center. It had an in-person enrollment of 119, declined to 25. The declined in-person instruction, was that a matter of the IEP team determined that the child or the student either didn't need or didn't meet the criteria for in-person, or is it the fact that you have a lot of kids that may have some underlying health issues and it just doesn't make health sense to have them risking their life to get in classroom?
I believe it's both, but I did invite Dr. Hitch to join us tonight in case there were questions like this. So Shannon, are you available to answer that one?
Hi, everyone. So actually that data reflected students who in-person services were recommended, but the families chose to decline. So some students have health and medical issues, others families just didn't feel safe or comfortable having their students come in person. And so that's just the reflection of those that said no to our offer.
And then I think Mark was also talking about there was the percent or the number of kids who were actually receiving services, and there was a number who declined, and then there's still a balance of, you know, anywhere 40 to 50 kids. So I think what I heard is those 40 to 50 where the IEP team with family said, yeah, this in person probably doesn't make sense. Is that the case?
Yes, so we had that conversation with every family, and so some families and IEP teams decided in person was not needed. The student was making progress doing remote learning, and in other cases it was recommended and families either chose to come or they chose to decline.
Is it possible for us to break down in that decline category the ones who the IEP team decided that didn't need to be in person versus the ones that the parents refused to have or did not want to have in person? Because to me, declining as a family is one thing. Having the IEP team decide something is a different thing, because not always do the parents and the IEP team agree. It'd be a first, I think, in a lot of cases if it did.
So the families that are noted in the graph as declining, those were only declining the in-person offer. The rest of the students, if they were not identified as in-person, were students where the IEP team made the decision that remote learning would be sufficient to meet their needs.
Okay.
Director Stewart, are you thinking though it would be
there's only 2 missing out of the 146?
I think the question is, if if there's an IEP team meeting, would there have been cases where a parent said, I really think in person is the right way to go, and the IEP team as a whole said, just in looking at all the data, we are coming to the conclusion that it's not appropriate? Would we have any way to track that?
Not without going in and looking at each individual child's IEP. So that was the team decision that was made. And they make those decisions based on previous performance, based on student progress, on IEP goals and objectives. It was meant to be a collaborative process with families and with the school team.
Okay.
Okay. There's still 2 persons missing in that group anyway, to be quite frank. You got 119 plus 25 equals 144. But you got 146, so somebody's missing somewhere. I'm not great at mathematics, but I know.
Well, you can imagine just the data collection was challenging in and of itself, considering all of the moving parts with fluid team meetings happening across all schools and districts in a very short, limited period of time, as well as us seeking to gain that data from school teams and principals. So, it was as accurate as we could get the data at that point in time. I was actually pretty impressed with what we were able to pull together.
I was just wondering if there was a 4th category or something that was missing, but it would, to be quite frank, it would be very helpful to know, again, if on the declined in person, if it was the parent who declined it or it was the IEP team who declined it. Now, the fact that you have to go through IEPs to find that out, I don't care. What I do care about is families who it was declined for them as opposed to them declining it. Because I can understand if a kid has an underlying health condition such as a heart transplant or whatever and doesn't want to be around possible infection or a kidney situation, whatever. They wouldn't want their child in there, or the parents are just so freaked out about COVID that they don't want their child leaving the house. But that's one thing. But if it's an IEP team that decides, no, we don't think you need it, to me, that's 2 separate categories.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll talk with Mike and Shannon to see if we can clarify the data.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. I lost track of the order. I think it's Director Sage, then Director Bleasner.
Thank you. How would a parent in a situation that Director Stewart was describing who wanted in-person services, but it was not deemed that they were necessary at this time, how would they ask for a reconsideration, or how would a parent approach, the special education department with that request?
They would speak with either their IEP team, their building principal, or their director, who would be overseeing their schools.
Thank you.
Director Bleasner?
Yes, well, thank you. Appreciate all the work that goes in. Recognize it is a work in progress and the focus on how do you get alignment. And you spoke about schedules and those pieces. And this isn't really a new problem. It's been true within our district and within schools. And how do you align these things across so many different buildings? So appreciate just that it brings it more to the forefront yet again in an online environment. The other question that I have with this would be and I was in a discussion around this, around grading practices. And working with ensuring that grading practices are equitable, especially within an online environment where it shifts, where we do, sometimes there are teachers who grade participation because you were part of a class or you did that. So I don't know where that is in our conversation as to how are we moving more towards, ideally, in my opinion, would be a mastery-based concept. Because there are behaviors and practices of doing things, which is one thing, and then there is a mastery of the concept in which you're working towards. So I'm not sure where we're at with that, but I would think that's another component that's being thought about. And maybe it's for the future that we have the conversation, but wanted to toss it out there.
Yeah, I can just speak briefly, and I think it might be good to put into a board brief too. We did provide our teachers with guidance for grading in a remote setting, and we pushed on that a bit to say, and kind of what you're referring to, competency, but also standards-based grading. Use the standards to be the criteria by which you assess students, and think about things like participation, particularly in a remote setting. Participation in a class and participation sitting at home in a device that you're just making sure is on is very different. And even participation in general, I agree with you that that's a separate category that should not be woven into a grade. Our conversation was to start with guidance and then to start pushing and having conversations. Our teachers needed something to start with on the first day, and so we provided some guidelines and some things to think about. And then I know Dr. Rose and Kelly Pease are working with teachers to continue to push on grading practices, particularly in remote. I don't want to overpromise this, but we do believe that this change has been an opportunity for us to go back and look at our grading practices and really think about them in different ways. And so, again, looking for the silver lining, we think that that may be one of the very few silver linings in this remote practice.
Because I remember about probably 5 years ago, we had looked at secondary and middle school, shifting more to a standard-based concept, and that didn't happen. The decision was made not to go forward with that work. So I appreciate the silver lining and working towards that. The other question that I had was, we've mentioned feedback and that this is a work in progress. Will there be steps along the way as we're in full remote learning for families or students to be able to provide feedback? Like, on Friday, this will be, have we set up a structure for that to happen so we can gather that and go? Or is it more submitting to Let's Talk, you're analyzing that? I'm just wondering if there's anything structured and planned to get that feedback.
I mean, the first thing we're thinking about looking at is that end of day checkout. We're planning on talking about that with our principals tomorrow, and then a way to gather some information about that. And by the way, that was an interesting, I was having a conversation with one of our principals today who's also a parent, who says, I'm struggling with this scheduling too. And we need to work on that. And so that's first step. We're also keeping in mind, we are in the second week. So we've been talking about, we need to survey our teachers too, to see what their needs are. And we're all excited, but we have to remember everybody is just learning this new system. And so we're trying to be very careful about not pushing too much out right away. At the same time, we don't want to lose the opportunity to gather some information that will help us to make changes more rapidly. So we are thinking again about starting with that first questions around scheduling, and then moving into questions around how the instruction's going, is it meeting your needs, things like connection, et cetera. The other thing to remember is those check-in and check-out times really are intended for teachers to check in with their kids about how things are going. So for example, I mentioned the resources that Johnny Fu and his team put together. There are surveys in there that ask kids, how well did you do today? Did you meet your goals? How well did the way of learning actually support you? And so we're gathering that information on an individual class basis as well, so teachers can make decisions. But I think what I'm hearing from you also is that more systemic, across the board, how are we gathering information to make adjustments in our approach? And again, we're just trying to be careful about the timing of that. We don't want to push surveys out so quickly that it just makes one more thing for people to do when they're really trying to set up routines and procedures, not only in their classrooms, but in their homes.
And actually having a more ad hoc approach where you have it being able to come in multiple ways and you're working with it is also valuable in many ways, but also setting up something systemic that can go through. I would think a thought exchange could be a possibility to be able to do things and sort of get some of those themes and things out in a different fashion. So just want to make sure that people know when that's happening, especially as there's a constant change as we go through, as we're online, as in person, and different things start to come back in different ways as our environment shifts. How do we make sure we're responsive to those changes coming?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the last thing, though, actual learning in the classroom. How right now we're still a lot of logistics in those pieces. Mm-hmm. I do wonder of what's actually happening in the classroom and how we're going to know that's working.
Yeah.
I get concerned that science and social studies seems to be asynchronous for most, and it makes me a little concerned. But I know you can get built in many ways. But so I guess that's the other piece. And I don't know if that's, can the board at some point, can we visit classrooms do a school visit virtually and be able to just see some of this in action to put that into an understanding of what is happening.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to be careful of these first few weeks of protecting teachers. But Teams has this amazing feature. It's called an administrative Teams page that allows principals to access any classroom anytime. So principals can be going in and out of classes. In fact, that was one of the things they shared as being really positive. So the technology is there, and again, when the time is right, yes, definitely having folks that can be in classrooms and watch and observe instruction. Our principals are already starting to do it and are asking the very same question. How do I give really good feedback about what I'm seeing so that we're delivering great instruction? And so we're going to be working with our principals, and Dale's also working on the evaluation side to really give good feedback to our teachers so that they can deliver good instruction. And then again, as you mentioned, making our classrooms visible. On the flip side of that, though, our classrooms are more open than they've ever been. I mean, literally in every single family's home, the classroom is open. So I think what I'm hearing from you, though, again, is that system level, how are we observing and watching our classes and making sure that we're delivering really high quality instruction. And then to wrap up, I also, what you mentioned is really important. These first few weeks really have been setting the procedures, the routines, the logistics, and now should start shifting more into that content and those conceptual understanding. And so, again, that's all gearing up. We're also really working hard to provide lots of instructional resources and making sure those are all going to work and we can put those in the hands of teachers.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, and actually my reason of speaking to school visits is to understand what is happening. What does it look like? What does classroom Teams look like when you're actually, and that's just better than to be able to speak to it as well and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Problem-based learning sort of concept.
Director Stewart, your hand is raised. Did you have another question?
Yes, I did. And this may actually go to communications more than it really does content. I've seen a major uptick on the parent pages on Facebook, and there's one page called At Home Learning, LWSD and Beyond. It's been a major uptick in comments. Have we seen an uptick in the Let's Talk page? I didn't know if we had any numbers on that. I heard Sally talk about how gone through the roof in the helping for IT problems, but I didn't know perhaps the Let's Talk feature was having the same explosion.
Mark, why don't you give us a chance to evaluate that, and I can get back to the board this week with that data.
Just curious, and I'm curious too if anyone, if we're also having an uptick in the traffic for our Facebook page, because I keep referring people over to both of them, and I want to find out if they're actually following through.
Sure.
Okay. Any other board member questions? No. Okay. Dr. Holman, does that conclude the presentation on the Return to School Task Force?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is the superintendent report, though. So Dr. Holman, if you have a superintendent report, you're back on again.
Yeah, yes, I do. And really, this is an overview of a letter I sent out to the community last week in response to the change in our county's transmission rate and COVID data. As you know, the Department of Health put out the decision tree that really outlined 3 different categories that schools were placed in: high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. High risk being counties that had 75 or more cases per 100,000 on average over 14 days. And so in King County, we started that process around 100 cases per 100,000 over 14 days. And we started to see a decline. And then last Wednesday, it was reported that as a county, we're at 65 cases per 100,000 over the last 14 days, which actually changes us from high risk to moderate risk. And so given that change, and actually it was a bit of a surprise that it had changed that quickly, I did draft a communication to staff and community just because we have been transparent that we are looking at the data, we're using the data as we think about decision-making processes. And I know there was a number of families that had communicated with me wondering if we knew about that change. And so just to be transparent with the community and our staff, wanted to indicate that yes, we're looking at it, but there's an and to evaluating this data. And so it's important for our community to know that we're looking at it and that this data has to maintain over time. It can't just be a blip on the screen and then we flip a light switch and kids re-enter our schoolhouses, but it has to be a very methodical approach to thinking about how do we get kids back into school and when is that right time, knowing that the last 2 major holiday weekends that we had, King County saw a relatively significant spike in the data. We hope that isn't the case with our most recent Labor Day weekend. Those data will come about 10 to 14 days after the holiday, and so by the end of the next week, we should have an indication of the impact of Labor Day on these data, because really, we are part of the overall community, and being part of the overall community, we have to know that any actions we take as a district have direct impact on the transmission rates and the spread of the virus. And we don't want to be that cause of the spread, and so we want to be very mindful about how we look at the data. And so, but we also know when you look at our regional data, when I think about our district of Redmond, Kirkland, Sammamish, Union Hill, all of which are data that are reported on the King County Public Health site, we know that the data ranges in those 4 areas between about 12.5 up to 39 cases per 100,000 over 14 days. And so we actually, as a district, have a lower rate than the overall county. But what I have also communicated with a number of families over the last week is it isn't just our district we have to pay attention to. We also have to think about the 50% plus of staff members that actually reside outside of our district attendance areas. And when I was just looking at some of the rates in areas where I know our staff live, some live up north, some live down south, we have staff that are in communities right now where their rates are still at 100, 105, 110 cases per 100,000 over the last 14 days. And so we also have to think about what it means to have an individual coming from a community into our school district as we continue to pay attention to the spread of the virus. And as I have said all along, our primary goal is to get kids back into in-person learning while we are considering health and safety. Those are key criteria. And then on Friday night, so I sent the message out to the community on Thursday, and then we saw Pierce County Public Health release a statement. We saw Snohomish County release a statement. And then Friday night, King County actually released a statement on their website, and Dr. Duchin and Director Hayes thoughtfully put together how they've been supporting schools. And I just want to read a portion of this because it really does contextualize our work moving forward and how we need to continue to think about this. It reads, if transmission rates remain moderate or continue to decline in King County, some school districts may decide to bring some students back to classrooms for in-person learning based on their own assessment and plans and ability to offer in-person learning with reduced risk. Washington Department of Health's decision tree recommends younger students be prioritized to return for in-person learning because they struggle the most with online learning and are in a critical stage in their development. Over time, hybrid learning may be considered for middle and high school students if transmission continues to decline. When in-person learning resumes, schools must continue to implement the Washington State Department of Health guidelines for anyone at school, which includes face covering, physical distancing, keeping students in small, consistent groups or cohorts, increased cleaning and sanitation, and improved ventilation in buildings. And so that's directly read from Dr. Duchin and Director Hayes' public release of information talking about their support for schools. We are analyzing our next steps. As you know, we started modeling hybrid learning, in-person learning for a number of grade levels. As we saw the case rates increase, and on July 23rd did make that decision and communicated to the community that we'd be starting with the majority of students in a fully remote model. And we have to think about how do we get kids back into school, being very thoughtful about that process, working with all of our internal stakeholders to make sure that our staff are prepared, our schools are prepared, and we know that there's a number of families that will say we want to continue in a remote environment. And so lots of considerations that have to go into actually getting kids back to in-person learning, but wanted the board to know that these are conversations we are having and thinking about how do we move forward in a very thoughtful manner, knowing that we have to be very cognizant of the data, pay attention to it, make sure that it is stable in that moderate range while we're doing our evaluation. That's my report.
Thank you, Dr. Holman. Any board member follow-up questions? Okay, the next item on our agenda, oh, I'm sorry, Director Bleasner.
Late. Thank you. So yes, so it has been a lot of great work that's happening in the partnership between the school districts around the area as well as with public health. The toolkit that's come out in which to support and be able to do this. We're much further along now, I think, than we were at the beginning of this month even, at being able to ensure that work with that safety and reducing the risk within our schools. So as you look at this and you go forward, when would be, is there a time frame or at least an idea of which the community could expect to hear if the numbers kept going down and all of that? When would be the next time they would hear that, yes, we're thinking about this and going forward with kindergarten or first grade or our younger learners?
Right. And so what I told the community was that they can expect to hear back from me this coming Friday with an update. That's exactly what we're talking about right now. And so as we've tried to do over the summer is to be very communicative with our community so that those questions don't have to sit for too long, knowing that it seems like every day there's a variable that changes. But the community will hear from me again on Friday as we continue to work with our internal stakeholders around a number of items. And so it'll be a constant point of communication so that families are apprised of where we are. So
I have appreciated the work going forward in which to be able to get special education and some in-person that way, as well as with our preschool, and really being willing to look at how we do that within this environment, because it's not going away soon. And how do we ensure that we're meeting the needs of our families and students on all sides, those who need an online instruction as well as those who would need an in-person instruction. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness going into that.
Yeah, and in a meeting with principals today, one of our principals reminded us that they are implementing school now, and it's not simple. The processes and procedures just to get kids from external to internal and actually in classes with this site has 15 students daily, and that is a process. And so as you think about expanding that, those processes and procedures obviously will be refined with practice, but it still is a process to get kids in. And so learning from that with the implementation we have now with kids on campus will also help us in the future.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks.
So I guess I'll just jump in here. I'd also like to thank you for participating in all of the meetings with public health and, really explaining to them what it is like on the ground with the knowledge that in-person instruction is, a best practice, and wishing to get back to that point. I've talked to several board directors, Siri and I both have, in this area and surrounding us, and we are the only ones, it seems, that have started the school year with some special education students in person, and of course now preschool. And it's something that other districts are looking to this district to model how they can do it in theirs. And I appreciate very much the extra work that you did to ensure that that happened at the start of our school year.
And while I know the compliment was directed towards me, the massive amount of staff time it took to make that happen, Shannon's team, I mean, every team, that is here in the district, yes. Just to get, a single student on campus had to be thought through. All of the health and safety, our transportation team has been working day and night to try and implement our transportation system differently than what we have in a typical school year. So many of our teams just to be able to do this, and our staff has been tremendous. I was out at a school last Thursday in a classroom seeing kids learning. Those staff, that teacher, that principal, so excited to welcome kids into the schoolhouse, and they did it in such a nice job. So, yes, thank you, and the team has just put in so much effort to make this happen. Absolutely, thank you to everyone.
Big round of applause.
Any other board member questions on the superintendent report? Okay, the next item on the agenda. Director Stewart, your hand went up I saw it go up, so I don't want to move on.
You almost escaped. You almost escaped. No, I wanted to let John and the others know that while I've been monitoring these various pages, granted, there's a lot of folks that are either asking questions or they're a little bit unrestful, shall we say. There have been a lot of compliments, and a lot of folks realize that, look, we know it's not quite working up to 100%. We know you're doing one hell of a try, and they really appreciate the fact you're trying your best. And that goes to the entire team. So I just wanted to let you all know that amongst all the folks that think they know how we should run the school district and how you should run your operations, there's a lot of folks that understand that it's a work in progress.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is board comments. Do any board members have any additional comments?
I would just jump in and say that our study session is going to include legislative updates for the WASDA General Assembly, if anyone is interested.
And for those listening at home, that immediately, soon after will follow the conclusion of this meeting. Any other board member comments? I just want to say that when I saw Dr. Holman's message to the community about the improving data in King County, I was filled with hope, and I remain filled with hope that the data will continue improving. I was surprised how happy that actually made me to see that, because I really hope that we can get kids back in school safely as soon as we can. Okay, following tonight's board meeting, the board will be meeting in study session. The topics to be discussed are a review of operational expectation 10, the learning environment and treatment of students, and operational expectation 11, the instructional program. In addition, we will be reviewing the 2020 legislative priorities and platform in advance of the Washington State School Directors Association General Assembly that is upcoming. Finally, the board will have an executive session for the purpose to consider the selection of a site or the acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase and the minimum price at which real estate will be offered for sale or lease. There will be no board action taken following the executive session. It should be noted that board meetings in October may be adjusted pending changes in the governor's orders regarding the Open Public Meetings Act. Information will be updated on the district's website as soon as that information is known. As of right now, the board's next scheduled meeting is on October 5th with a study session in person. It's scheduled at 5 p.m. At the Resource Center, followed by a 7 p.m. board meeting. I think everyone's expectation is that the governor will extend the Open Public Meetings Act order, and if that's the case, we will continue with the schedule that we've been following with the board meeting at 5 p.m. followed by study session. Okay, we've reached the end of the we've reached the end of the agenda tonight, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Carlson and seconded by Director Bleasner that we adjourn. All those in favor, please signify by voting aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, the meeting is now adjourned.
See you soon.
Before everyone, before we turn off the camera, before everyone leaves, so we have the study session. Is everyone okay with a 7:02 right now? My clock is 7:15 for the study session. Okay, that's what we'll do. Okay,
Sure.
See you soon.